Planning District Convention to order for Thursday, May 6th, 2024, 7 p.m. in-person meeting. And let's see, Tony is going to be joining a little late, and then once he does, we will have to take the electronic vote participation when he joins, but he is not on the list yet. So Ruth, you want to do the roll call?
Supervisor Galloway,
Present.
Supervisor Pruitt,
Present.
Supervisor O'Brien, Mr. Smith, Supervisor Goolsby,
Present.
Mr. Higgins,
Present.
Supervisor Barlow,
Present.
Supervisor Woodward,
Here.
Supervisor Reed,
Here.
Supervisor Rutherford,
Present.
Commissioner Duranzio,
Here.
Counselor Payne.
Here. Great, thank you. And we can move to comments from the public. Is there anyone online who wishes to give public comment? I do not see anybody in person who wishes to give public comment. We'll move on from public comment. John had to give a public comment in a minute. And that will take us to item 3, presentation. We have the TJPDC Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy Plan, or SEDS. This thing was dense.
You can say that we got our money's worth. So over the last year, we've had Camoin Associates working with us develop a comprehensive economic development strategy. And Alex and Dan are here with us virtually tonight to present to you the draft final plan.
All right, everyone. I hope you can hear me okay. If not, just stop me. But like Ruth said, Dan and I are here today to really give you a high-level overview of sort of where we've been in this process, just to appreciate all the work that did go into this, and why this is such a valuable document. We really want to highlight that, as we hope that the commission will move to adopt it and just demonstrate the value that it's going to have moving forward for the group. So basically what I just outlined, let's set some of the context, understand what's in the plan. I know that it is part of your packet. It was available for the 30-day comment period, which the EDA sanctions that just ended last Saturday, I believe. So we got some good comments, but we're not going to go through item by item today, since you all have access to that. We're happy to answer any questions on specifics. We'll go through at the high level. Talk about implementation, talk about how this report and action items move forward. That's going to be a group effort. It is not just the TJPDC that's responsible for that. So that's the good news. And then we'll talk about next steps and where we go from here. So I had the pleasure of having a conversation with all of you a while ago at this point. I know Ruth has been giving updates. But again, just to sort of center what a SEDS is, the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, it is truly a document that is based in thinking regionally for economic development. Now, obviously across this region, we've got very different priorities and characteristics and factors that affect the entire region. So we're not looking to do economic development the same in all of these areas, but we are looking to pick up on opportunities that touch multiple parts of the region, really think about sharing resources and amplifying the strengths, assets that the region does have. Some opportunities I think it's important to point out with the SEDS. We, through this process, with many stakeholders involved along the way, have set a regional vision for shared economic development goals. So again, those are going to apply differently throughout the region, but we're working toward the shared goal, and that is going to help in terms of being able to leverage funding opportunities, determining what's the right fit for different parts of the region. This is a regional document. It does not supersede or come before any of the local work that's been done. All of the local economic developers were great in contributing to this. This, again, is meant to amplify the work that they're doing, but does not in any way sort of take over what they're doing. Through a lot of these efforts of the actions that we'll talk about, we are looking to grow existing industries, the backbone of the existing community, emerging industries that might be bubbling up today. This is a five-year time span on the SED. So, we want to look beyond today, tomorrow, and really think about those industries and jobs that might look a little bit different today. This is also an opportunity to look at large scale infrastructure investments. The SEDS is really has the potential to set up the region to be able to access significant infrastructure funds when those arise at the EDA or other federal agencies. And so that's one of those action items that sort of touches multiple parts of the region and can have a big impact. Just a highlight of, again, all of the work that has gone into this since February of 2023. So we've got our about 30-person or so SED committee that helped us along the way. We worked on a pretty significant economic data analysis. All of that is a resource for this group and any of the other stakeholders to use, from demographics, industry, occupation, resilience, a lot of good data to use in there. Interviews, one-on-ones, focus groups, site visits to the region, got to go through each of the localities, a business survey, this public comment period where we got some pretty thoughtful comments to think about for the whole document, and then the commission itself. One of the components of the document and required by the EDA and really helps us think about the different components of an overall economy was a SWOT analysis. And so, right, this just sort of summarizes a lot of those key components that the EDA looks for in the SEDS. We did that at the regional level, so the TJPDC region as a whole, and then also broke it down by locality, since there is such differentiation across the region. The different colors here indicate the perceived need or opportunity to work in that particular area. So green was a lower perceived need, meaning, that item might be doing pretty well in any of the particular localities or across the region. And then to the other side of the scale is the orange, which indicates that this is an area that really could be strengthened or grown or expanded through our strategies. So that takes us to the summary of the goals and strategies. Overall, just to put it in perspective for you, so we've got these 4 goal areas, which I'll just summarize briefly here. 10 strategies, so those are the letters underneath the goals, and then 44 actions. So I think just the way to think about it, like those 10 strategies, 1A, 1B, 1C, those are our, right, the direction that we want to head for each of these strategies. And so when you're thinking, across the 5 years or trying to boil down what the strategy really comes down to, I think this is a good page to keep coming back to. So goal area 1 is really focused on our existing industries, our emerging industries, leveraging those market opportunities both within and capturing market perhaps outside of the region, and overall expanding economic potential. Goal 2 is focused on workforce. So, there's not one conversation that we have today that isn't workforce related in some way with the business. And so really throughout this process, the workforce actions have actually already started to develop with some of the regional partners. And so that's exciting to see in terms of getting the private sector involved a little bit more. And so there's already quite a bit of work going on in this space, and really harnessing that attention, focusing on specific industries and occupations. That's what that goal is all about. Goal 3 focuses on the community and placemaking side of the economy. So from our transportation hubs to our housing to our downtowns and main streets, they play such an important role in this region's economy. We at the in-person meeting, I guess in February, we talked a little bit about with one participant how some of these strategies apply to some of the more rural locations across the region. And so, right, it's exciting to see when a community sees themselves in some of these strategies. Last one here is investing in components of infrastructure that are going to enable business development opportunities. So site readiness, right? The ability to have a site that is ready to build on and welcome a business. Clearly so important to be able to both grow from within and attract from outside the region. And so that is a big focus. And again, an area that has a lot of work going on in it, but this seeks to coordinate that and again, focus on your target markets and emerging industries as well. With those goal areas and strategies, we needed a way to think about, there's our limited time and resources. How do we think about where do we start with any of these? And so what we did was worked on a scale of, again, like left to right here. So an emergent strategy, something was designated as emergent if it was really in its infancy and needed a little bit more work in terms of actual conceptualization and the stakeholders involved in leading that. So those are the strategies that need a little bit more work to come along. The evolving strategies, they need a clear leader and resource allocation, but there is some maybe existing work going on in that particular area. And then to the right in the green, those launch ready strategies, those are the ones that really have partners behind them that maybe have the right time, place, and funding. And those are the ones that are ready to be executed so that they can move forward. So there's a lot of movement, I'd say, in between each of these categories, but important to all of those strategies that we just looked at on the last page. Each of those are categorized in one of these 3 areas. And again, just to get your heads around where do we start and what do we need to move forward? Where do resources need to be devoted to make sure we advance these important strategies? Implementation. So we've got this great plan, this great strategy, and the question is, where do we go from here? How do we ensure over these next 5 years that we are successful? And so there's a couple different ways just to highlight here. The SEDS committee is still essentially going to function as a body that keeps this document up to date. So meeting at least once a year to gather around the summary, those strategies and goal areas that I mentioned, to update and really keep track of the progress that has been made. In order to help that conversation, we envision a implementation committee that has already been discussed with the partners that would be involved. Those are really some of the core economic development leaders within the region. And this is work that they're all working on, day in and day out. So they are really important in terms of moving these items forward. On the right-hand side of your screen, you can see partners in action. This list of 25 to 30 or so partners, really just shows that this is not on the TJPDC to strictly implement. They are the convener. Owner of the document would perhaps be the conduit for federal funds or certain funding, but ultimately there is, and this is, just a beginning list essentially, right, of the partners that would be involved. I anticipate as the strategies evolve over the course of 5 years that this list would continue to grow and grow. Another part of the implementation and keeping track of progress, of course, is metrics. How are we going to know that we're successful? Year to year, that might look, a little bit different. Some in terms of when data is collected and reported and things like that. Qualitative and quantitative is going to be important, but we boiled down 3 metrics for each goal area to keep track of. And again, partners would be involved in helping to track this. They may be adjusted or grow along the way. But we do think that this will be important. One of the aspects of the SEDS that the EDA mandates is that there's a annual update every year. And so these metrics, I imagine, will be reported on that annual update, along with any notable progress on the strategies, in addition to any adaptations or refinements to the overall plan as well. Dan, anything that you want to add on metrics, strategy, implementation while we're still on the topic?
Oh, I think you've done a good job. With metrics, you'll note here there are some metrics that are output related, meaning it's tracking activity, our partners doing what they should be doing, and our clients being served, and then outcome, larger indicators as to whether you're really moving the needle in terms of the changing conditions. So for instance, building permits by locality, that's an output. But the labor force participation rate would be more of an outcome. So we were very cognizant about that and trying to make sure that these are easily tracked, that it doesn't require a data analytics specialist to be able to do this, that the commission and their partners can be able to do that. The only other thing that I would add, just to stress the importance of having the SEDS on hand. We keep talking about how this is required by the Economic Development Administration of the U.S. Department of Commerce, but it's been around for about 50 years. And it really helps the federal government prioritize where funds should be distributed when they're requested by different states and localities. If you have a SEDS in place, that sends a signal that you've thought through what the priorities of the region ought to be. So when a request comes along, they can tie it to this kind of a process. And it is used not only by the Department of Commerce, but by Department of Labor and Transportation and other entities. It is an indicator that the region is doing all that it can to get its act together. And just as one example, during the pandemic, the federal government had to move money out to communities to help deal with businesses that were in need. And if you had a SEDS and you were an economic development district, immediately $450,000 appeared in your regional planning commission's budget to establish a revolving loan for businesses. And that's money that's going to continue for decades, really. Well, the region didn't have this SEDS in place. And, so this is a first step. It's making sure that you're doing what you can to be in alignment with state priorities and where they align federal priorities as well.
Thanks, Dan. I'll talk about one more component of the plan, and then I will pause for any comments, questions. Some of you may remember that the other part of this process, which is quite novel actually, is working across the boundary lines of the TJPDC into the Rappahannock-Rapidan region, and to work with the Go Virginia Region 9 Council to develop super regional strategies. And so those are further looking at the overlap of potential economic growth that could touch both of the regions. And so between both of the SEDS committees, all of our stakeholder meetings, working with local economic developers across both of the regions. Again, this is just the summary here of those goal areas that are associated with the super regional. There is a plan in place to figure out exactly how to work these into the growth plan for Go Virginia, to figure out how to essentially advance these strategies at that level. You'll notice that some of these are a really good fit for Go Virginia, industry-based, workforce-based, things like that. There are a couple that we felt were opportunities at that super regional level, but that are not necessarily Go Virginia related. So housing, tourism, right? Not necessarily the focus of Go Virginia. However, again, having this in place, identifying those shared opportunities, it's a good, again, guiding document to have, should there be an opportunity to leverage these strategies. So that is a quick overview. Just to be respectful of time, you can see here there's a couple of important dates coming up. Rappahannock's SEDS is currently out on their 30-day review period until mid-May. We will do some final wrap up with the SEDS committee, a little bit similar to what we're doing here, and talk about next steps and moving forward and what implementation looks like. We'll go to Go Virginia, talk about their super regional strategies, talk with the Central Virginia Partnership and their role in this as well. Continue that conversation, I should say, because they've been highly involved in this whole process. And then the annual reporting to EDA would be one of those next steps. So I will pause there for any comments or questions before the next step.
And I should say, I was remiss in saying that the role of the SEDS. One other thing is that nonprofit organizations that are in this area, in the region, can also look to the SEDS to see if it aligns with their priorities as they seek federal funding as well. So it doesn't all have to go through the region, but the fact that the region has coordinated this is what's very important, and that it goes on record and gets approved by the EDA, which we expect would happen this year.
Ruth, Christine, anything on your end?
I don't have anything to add unless you guys have questions.
I have one comment, and I did read through it, and there was a lot of interesting information, I think, especially around the different sectors that are growing. And at least my interpretation, it seems like a lot of the more traditional blue collar professions are declining, and a lot of the growth areas are either require advanced degrees or be in the service sector. So I know we're voting on this, I don't have an amendment or anything, I guess this is just amusing, but I wondered if one of the strategies it would be worthwhile explicitly pointing towards like a community wealth building aimed at making sure as many people as possible actually can benefit from this economic growth. Because I just wondered, would a lot of these strategies, given the growth industries, not reach people who have just a high school diploma or an associate's degree? And that's the only comment I have.
Actually, to sort of follow on that, this may be a process and data question, but in digging into some of the metrics here for changes in employment by type, and this is not the first time I've noticed this, but there seems to be this ever-growing category of general managers, and not general managers in the dealerships of the general, I mean, generally management type jobs. But it's really difficult to parse what that exactly means. If you look at the pure numbers there, and the percentages, that seems to be a whole lot of chiefs and relatively few Indians if all of these people are managers. So I'm sort of curious as to, that might just be an evolving, maybe manager isn't the right word, maybe it's general white collar job that would do that. So that was sort of curious to me. And then if you wouldn't mind expounding on, you didn't think of this as a priority, but this military and defense corridor that we're popping in here seems to be worth pursuing. And of course, I know Greene County has grabbed that with both hands with some of their improvements and trying to integrate that with their technology, their tech zones and such. But if you could expound on how that came to be, and aside from federal employees making their way down here as a convenient place to be in the striking distance of Northern Virginia, what's really going into that?
Is the question, just to make sure we heard you correctly, is the question a little bit of the generation of the super regional strategy around the defense and intelligence industry corridor, where that came about? Is that the question?
Yeah, and again, we're talking about the sort of job growth, but it seems and the growth of employment here, but it seems, it seems that is largely going to be driven by federal employees, either in uniform or not, relocating. Not to say there aren't job shops, in every corner of the shop up there in Engine, but if you just really expand on how we ended up. It seems to be, from the discussion, it seems like it was a Johnny come lately to the evaluation here. This wasn't highlighted, but in retrospect, now we are taking a closer look at it. How did that sort of come about, and what are we really talking about in terms of that corridor?
Yeah. So I can give a start with that, and then Dan, you might want to jump in. That came about really through talking about some of the the strengths of the region, right, and some of the assets that it has in terms of its geography and the existing federal agencies in the region and their prospects at growing, right? So particularly land in Greene, Albemarle, obviously Fluvanna Station, and Charlottesville, along with other components, I would say, right? Obviously into Culpeper, Orange, Fauquier, to really this corridor that has pieces of the defense and intelligence industry. And I think they're sort of a right time, right place in terms of how do we strategically think about coordinating this. And it's certainly going to involve those larger federal players. However, the sort of smaller business infrastructure around that certainly has opportunities as well. So there's definitely a scale, I would say, of the type of job worker that would be associated with those different kinds of training, education that could be available in the region.
So
Dan?
I guess sort of what I was driving at is that it's hard to incentivize the federal government to do anything in the sense that if they want to come, they'll come. You can't give them tax incentives. You can't sort of push. You can't. You can't do tax abatements. That doesn't do any good. But this idea of the sort of supporting systems around it, and I'm trying to get my head around how we promote that, other than the fact that if we build it, they will come.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let me try, and I apologize because I seem to be picking up every other word, but I'm getting the gist.
That's
Yeah, that's it. This first originated as a super regional because in the Rappahannock-Rapidan area, Fauquier County in particular was seeing a lot of movement in terms of defense contractors coming out of Northern Virginia looking for a lower cost environment in which to locate, and realizing that they could be in Region 9 and not, or closer to the outside of the Vienna and Tyson's area. And so we began looking at this, and then realized that in the Charlottesville area, there were a lot of companies that fell into this category. It's kind of like the crossover between defense and intelligence, which is cybersecurity largely these days, but a lot of IT firms, some manufacturing, and a lot of R&D. In fact, the business park, the UVA business park has quite a few of these kinds of companies. And so you had both at the southern end of Region 9, and then at the very furthest northern end, you had this concentration. And so we were trying to figure out, how can we really leverage both sides of this to build out a corridor so that the counties in between can see some more of these higher technology companies that are going to drive the future. We call it defense, but really it's not federal employees, and it's not always just federal contractors. But it is intelligence that feeds into that whole industry sector, and we think there's an opportunity here to grow it.
Right.
I will also.
Does that help?
It does a bit. I just started turning it over in my head, so I didn't have I just don't have a set of opinions about it as yet, but it sort of sparked.
So in February of 2023, there was a Defense Industry Economic Impact on the Charlottesville Region report that was done by the Weldon Cooper Center that would be worth looking into. It specifically mentions the growth over the last 50 years of that industry within the region. There are currently over 100 employers in that sub-industry. And it's everything from software development for government contracting to intelligence to research and development, education. Like it's a pretty wide variety of actual jobs, but is a huge part of our local economy.
Well,
Yeah, and in fact, we include some information in the super regional strategy about growth over the past year, and just in job numbers. And when it's growing at a rapid pace, it's categorized as emerging. And it's showing that the Charlottesville region in particular is emerging in this space. And it shows in the Rappahannock area that it is present, meaning that it's been occurring for quite some time. So you have growth in terms of numbers of new jobs, and they're higher paying jobs that are happening. We're saying designate this, make it a real thing, and grow it out, because that's going to have spin-off value into many different kinds of industries, not just defense, but for commercialization of the research that's coming out of some of these firms, and perhaps even manufacturing as well.
all right, thanks. The only other comment I have, besides the fact that we're putting forth the notion that statistically there are 0% Asian people in this region, which struck me as a little weird. The only thing that, just to Councilor Haynes' comment, to add to that, we've got this barbell of growth of jobs in terms of income. We also got people in the middle, which is.
I think something to kind of add on to this is we look as a region, of course, we talk about career and technical education all the time. That's a huge need. And I'm part of numerous trade organizations in construction. And we solicit scholarships, and we advertise pretty directly to the demographics as well as the schools for students looking for that education. And we got 0 applications. When you talk about blue collar, I mean, and I have had to adjust my view of what that means now, because my father used to be a software developer in Charlottesville, or software fabricator in Charlottesville in the 90s. And which he said, he's like, I was the equivalent of a blue collar, it just so happened I worked with circuit boards.
Right.
And so what does that translate to here? That is that defense context, that is cybersecurity, that is, you're starting to see that turn into, you know, what is your now telephone line person and those guys, well, now they're running fiber, you know, and I think when we kind of envision that as us as a region, one, you know, the demographics that, how do you get the demographics to be that, you know, welding, hammer swinging, you know,
Sticks and bricks.
hard paper, putting up there, yeah. I mean, it is actually so near impossible, it's sad. You know, we're dependent on demographics that we are moving here from foreign countries, as well as, you know, in Southside Virginia, if there wasn't a mass migration of Amish from Lancaster, Delaware, and Illinois, there would be very little new construction housing happening in Southside, Central, and Southwest Virginia, which is a weird twist, which no one's talking about on an economic basis. So, you know, I err on the side of we have to be thinking about blue collar from that, you know, there's still a desk.
Right.
Because you're not finding the demographics that will work that, you know, brick and mortar kind of hanging sticks, putting roofing on.
In to develop infrastructure, people actually build the infrastructure are here to build it.
Exactly. Well, I mean, but you have to look at America historically, you know, the Crozet Tunnel, you know, that Nelson County has, which at the time of its completion, right, it was the largest tunnel at its time. You know, it was built by Irish immigrants. That's right. You know, America has that history that goes back hundreds of years, and the only time we were self-sufficient with our workforce was from like 1946 to 1975. And that was a very brief window, you know, as then you watch demographics, technology change and all that. You know, so when I think about economic factors, I look at Nelson County in different ways. I'm like, yeah, they work from home. They're nurses. There are teachers, there are police, and, you know, but in terms of attracting a factory, in terms of attracting those entities, like, that's something I've battled with in my mind is if we attracted Nelson a 400 job producing, which is insane. So let's bring it down to 100, just 100, which doesn't take a big building to accomplish that. That is fabricating or building some type of thing. We would struggle to find people to fill those chairs. It's just a fact. I mean, currently in Nelson, there's not a contractor that's short 5 to 10 guys. And there's a lot of contractors building houses. So translate that into something of that nature. Well, then you got to figure out the education piece. Then you got to assume those, when that entity comes, that you're going to have the students who want to be educated to do that.
Yep.
You know, I took the Nelson County class, which is like 110-ish, between 100 and 125. 50% are going to some form of higher education and they're never coming back to Nelson. Probably, you know, if you just take raw statistics and just thinking in anecdotal evidence.
Home for Christmas.
Yep.
That's it.
And then there's 5 to 10 that are gonna go into the military, all right? Bunch of them, they're gonna go do that and they're gonna find new lives. Oh, did we lose people? Okay. And then you get further into that, you get that 30 to 40 kids. Well, I'll be honest, those 20 of those 30 to 40 are gonna go work for dad's farm, you know, mom's parlor or whatever it is. They got some kind of thing, root, job and lifestyle that keeps them here. And then you're really advertising to 15 to 30 kids on some of these jobs. And those 15 to 30 kids, they don't know what they really want to do. And it's hard to do a welding class because of those 30. And that's not saying that women can't be welders, but typically in Nelson, it's the logger's son who becomes a welder. But 15, 3 or 4 are willing to do that, maybe, just to get the class and get the experience. So I often struggle when I think about that, like, how is it that we can attract when we don't have the demographics to fill the seats? And we can't attract the demographics to fill the seats unless you figure out a housing problem. Because that's astronomical, and it's, yeah.
Yeah, well, and now we have 957 border dwellers, which I guess is.
Yeah. I don't know, that was my whole rant, but
Good rant.
I think that's all the answers though.
I have a question, on slide 20 of the addendum, we've got all the good helpful things. I want to make sure I'm interpreting it correctly, but it looks like while we're experiencing growth in, professional, scientific, and technological services and healthcare, we are not, like, that location quotient is sub 1, which I understand to means that we are being outpaced on that growth nationally, which goes against what I would say is the popular anecdotal understanding of the job market locally, where, oh, we're really kings of tech bros and health services. We got a big, cutting edge hospital right next door. So I'm curious, like, what is the story that I'm missing there, that we're being outpaced nationally? In those sectors.
You said slide.
What page of the full packet?
On the full packet, that is 62.
I believe, let me go to 62. I can just switch this up here for everyone too. So location quotient, actually, it doesn't speak to the pace of growth. It speaks to the concentration of the industry in a particular area compared to the US level. So hold on, let me get this up here. So if we're looking at the gray bottom right quadrant, these are the emerging industries, the categories that Dan was alluding to. So those emerging industries, they have positive job growth. So they're on this side of the axis, but they don't have a location quotient greater than 1, meaning they aren't particularly specialized in the region. If something is high up on this vertical axis, this is the location quotient. So 0 at the bottom here, 3 at the top. Anything above typically like a 1.25 is sort of considered highly specialized. I mean, I've seen them into like 600 and things if something's like very, very niche. Anyways, all of that to say that this is a way to keep, there's no necessarily sweet spot for growth and for location quotient, but it helps to understand the assets around a particular industry. If something is highly specialized, then, do those surrounding industries have another application, or if it's so specialized, is the economy overly reliant on that one industry? So lots of different ways to look at this, but for professional and scientific in general, you can see the growth around 10%, and a location quotient, a little less than 1. So about average, I'd say.
I still don't think that actually gets to the meat of what I was curious about, which is that it just seems to defy, I would say, the anecdotal thinking on a region that I encountered, that I frankly came here with before I had read this document. And I guess I don't understand it, is what I'm saying. I don't understand what it is about the TJPDC region that makes us so heavily concentrated in utilities and government service. But not apparently concentrated in health and science, when we have a scientific defense industry corridor that we've been talking about all this time, and we have a cutting edge, top of the nation research institution.
Yeah, I sort of noticed that there may be some conflation of the government being.
That's the
state
university.
employees.
Yeah, everything you get.
That's right. All of that's going to be in government.
Which is growth, yes, the portal of anecdotes and data here.
Yes, yep, that is true, that the education jobs, the public sector education and healthcare jobs fall under government. in terms of how the industries are classified. So that is why the size of the bubble is so big. That indicates overall job count. So that's the healthcare education positions in there, along with your sort of local public sector as well. And that utilities being so concentrated as well, but relatively small in terms of the bubble size. So relatively small in terms of jobs, but very, very specialized. That's where anything nuclear related to Louisa County is going to show up.
That explains it, but to look at that graph, and to see the government bubble, doesn't at all break that information out and taking a look at.
Mhm.
It might be useful if we had some other metric that could measure those things on a graph like that.
Yeah, because I mean, that's a lot of the, I mean, that's your technical, your scientists, your leading edge.
They also draw their check from UVA or DOD,
Right.
so they're all in the same bubble.
Right. So,
I mean, you could just take one bubble, but UVA, and everyone understands it.
well, I mean, the spook shop up there is hiring cyber people as fast as they possibly can.
And then again, not knowing where that line is, I don't know how far attenuated you have to be as a GovCon to still be in the Gov box versus in the science and tech box.
So if you've been sitting up at the spook shop for 15 years for who's Allen, or you
Yeah.
in the box, or you.
Yeah, if I'm gonna get a contract, I have my IC badge, my government, what. Okay. I'm happy we hashed this out and don't feel any better about it. Well, they didn't make the sectors up.
To make codes.
There certainly is a lot of context. I know it's quite dense. The data report in particular does address the exact conversation topics that we are getting at. We always wish it was more clear cut than necessarily maybe how it's measured, but we do go into some detail in terms of some of those nuances particular to the area, particularly with the UVA and the educational institutions, right? That's so important as an economic generator in the region.
Any other comments? We have gone past time on this item. Are we, any wrap up there, Alex, or are we all?
No, I think we went through it all on our end.
The questions I had were relative to more just understanding the data and the info, so I'll do some follow up on that just electronically.
Yeah.
Just trying to understand it, specifically some stuff for Albemarle.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you need, this is an action item. We have a resolution that was included in the packet to adopt the 2024 Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy. Is there a motion to do that? Is there a second to do that?
I'll second it.
All right, the motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? All right, that motion carries. Thank you. I see that, thank you, Alex. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you. It's been a pleasure and honor.
All right, Commissioner, we have Mr. O'Brien looks to have joined. Where'd he go? Oh, there he is. Mr. O'Brien, we have not taken the action to allow you to participate electronically yet. Could you just state your location and your reason for participating electronically? Tony, were you able to hear me? You're muted if you did. You drowned. So it's coming back from.
That's fine, that's it.
What could possibly go wrong?
All right, we're gonna let you just listen in and we will, we'll deal with that when you get to a safe spot to touch buttons. All right, assume that he can hear. So number 3B is the 2024 legislative report presentation. David?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and I'll try to help make up some time by being very brief. There was or is a memo in your packet, just summarizing that very briefly. As you know, the General Assembly adjourned in early March, adopted a budget. Governor proposed a ton of amendments. At the 11th hour, Governor and the General Assembly decided to take a step back. They are supposedly talking now, trying to come to some agreement on a budget for the next 2 years, next 2 fiscal years, that can be presented when the General Assembly convenes in about 10 days, May the 13th, I believe. It's been kind of crickets, which is kind of typical when you get folks spread out all over the state behind closed doors. But as I said in the memo, I think the first thing that they are going to have to do is decide where they are on the revenues before, in terms of primarily the digital services tax, before they can go to the appropriation side. But I've noted in the memo, there are a couple of local budget items that were included in the General Assembly approved budgets: money for harmful algal blooms in Lake Anna, some money for water impoundment in Greene County. So reached out to both counties and asked for some soft advocacy with the budget folks, just to reassure them, on that, and ask that be included in the final budget. City of Charlottesville had a successful legislative initiative, increased the caps for council members, something that hadn't been done for 20-some years, between 25 and 30 years. And then probably the biggest downer that we saw here in the region and across the state, many local governments were supporting the bills to allow for a 1-cent sales tax for school construction, if approved in a local referendum. Bills were passed by both the House and the Senate to do that, but the bills were vetoed. So I don't know that will become part of the budget negotiation that's going on now. And if not, I think we are, safe to say that those bills will come back again next year. And then finally, I just noted some things that are kind of in the future here in the coming months as we work through the summer and fall. Of course, the JLAC report on K-12 funding came out last summer. There's a joint subcommittee of legislators that's going to be taking a look at those recommendations more closely in the interim. So it may be that we see some package of recommendations coming to the next General Assembly session. I put in here that the JLARC was going to have its meeting next week to set their work plan. They've canceled that meeting. One of the things they kind of have on their radar with all the money that has come into the state in the past couple of years for broadband is to step back and take a look at that. And then I'll just skip down solar. We had a number of bills this past session. I think there's going to continue to be a lot of discussion here in the off season about solar, particularly and how that fits into the Clean Economy Act that was adopted back in 2020. And just where lines are drawn for how we're going to reach those goals. What's local authority going to be on solar? A lot of moving parts on that. We'll keep you updated. I'll stop there, and if you have any questions, be glad to try to answer.
Questions for David?
One out of pure laziness, and maybe you know this off the top of your head. Legislation to allow localities to set speed limits under lower than 25 miles an hour. Did that make it or not?
I believe there was an amendment proposed to that bill by the governor. I'd have to go back and look and see if the amendment was accepted or if it was rejected by the General Assembly. I've got that on my computer. I'll let you know. So it's not so. It's either passed if the amendment was accepted. If it hasn't been accepted, then it's still in the process.
Any other questions?
David, this is Tony. I had a question about your thoughts on legislation regarding solar and what you're reading in the tea leaves in terms of what might happen there, because it's a hot topic in Fluvanna right now.
Yeah, I think it's really kind of too early to say. A number of those bills that were gonna, eat into local authority were put by for the year. The Housing Commission is going to be looking at some. The Senate Agriculture Committee is going to be looking at some other things, and I think you're going to have your advocates on both sides of that issue. And if there's going to be some compromise, it doesn't come until probably late this year, heading into the next session. And if there's no compromise, then you then you go into battle again. I think it's just really too early to tell.
Okay, thank you, appreciate it.
And let's do this just because we'll have him in there, but since he's driving, I know that Tony is in Virginia and he is driving back to Fluvanna tonight. So that is his location and the reason for participating electronically. Can I have a motion to allow Supervisor O'Brien to participate electronically? Second? Second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? All right, Mr. O'Brien is officially in the meeting. And that's mainly for voting. Later. Number 4, the consent agenda. We have the minutes of April 4th, 24, and the minutes of April 4th closed session. Any changes, edits, corrections to those minutes? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve both of those sets of minutes? Is there a second? I second. All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? All right. And then we will move to the March financial reports. Are you handling it like that? Okay. Making sure one time I did that. She was here.
She was behind you. Current net quick assets, as of the end of March, we're just under 1.4 million. We have surpassed our goal of having 5 months of operating on hand. We have just over 720,000 in capital reserve on hand. March's net gain was 40,588. You'll note the body pass through for March was just shy of 5 million, largest to date. And you'll see in the executive director's report later that those passings are starting to increase more rapidly now that some of the, engineering and design work is done, and we're starting to see the construction come through. We're starting to see a real uptick on the federal funds and the local matches coming through. And then it was a strong financial month again. I don't have anything more than that.
Questions about the financial reports for March? For a motion to accept the March financial report. Or the consent agenda. We did them individually, so calling that one out now. Do we have a motion to adopt or accept the March financial reports? So moved. Is there a second? Second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you, Tony. All right, item number 5, A, new business TJPDC officer slate notice from the nominating committee, and Mr. Rutherford.
Yes. First and foremost, thank you all. I feel like I've learned everything that I know from Tom. So if you don't like it, it's his fault. Anyways, we had a brief meeting. We realized that one of our members probably would be a officer potential, so we fired him from the committee. So Mr. Payne, so he was not able to attend that way. So one of the how we were kind of looking at the slate was having Tony as chair, Mr. Michael Payne as vice chair, Keith Smith as treasurer, and I believe it's Ruth as secretary. Right, or is it you, Christine?
It's usually me or
All right,
designate,
Christine
but
is-
it can be either, because she's doing it anyway.
All right, we will take Christine as secretary. That keeps us with the tradition of the rural urban swapping. It also spreads some of the representation to different municipalities that haven't had representation in this for a while. We also do have a large amount of membership that is new. So hopefully, once they get a year under their belt, we can start circulating some new blood into the circulation.
Very good. Now, we actually,
Do not need action, it's just presented as the
for
slate.
the June meeting, again, we
That's
still
what
take action on the slate in June if everybody's in agreement with it. I guess if you're in disagreement with it.
It's a great time to talk.
You could call Jesse. If you have any objections or anything to those right now, then yeah, give it time for it.
Yeah.
You did a great job.
That was all my idea, actually. I went against it.
Well, we appreciate you doing that, Jesse, to get the slate together, so that we'll be all set up for June. And I don't hear any objections, so very good. We'll go to new business item B, 2024 Community Development Block Grant Regional Priorities. And this was revised, so were the hard copies distributed. And Christine, do you need to speak to that one?
Yep. Okay. So each year, the Virginia Department of Housing and Community Development reaches out to the 21 planning district commissions so that they can begin to anticipate any applications that may come in the upcoming year. So we then reach out to all 6 staff in our local governments to see what they might be thinking along the lines of CDBG. By putting a project on this list, it does not commit anyone to apply. It just says there is the potential that there is a project related to this. Charlottesville would not be included because they are already a, what's the word I'm looking for? Where you automatically get the funds. Entitlement. So this is for the non-entitlement communities. So that's why they wouldn't be listed if they do have a project. Yesterday I did hear from Greene. So the revision is adding Greene at the bottom. Basically what this does is we set up that there are these potential activities that may occur. We are prioritizing those activities. And then if you all do choose to submit applications, there's a very small scoring advantage for having already been identified in that regional priorities list. So it comes before all 21 planning district commissions for you guys to approve that and then send it back up to DHCD so that they have a comprehensive understanding of potential applications that may come in the next year.
Any questions?
One very small question of curiosity is the point benefit for if it's 1, 2, 3, no matter which one it is the point benefit the same?
I asked a follow-up question on this that I did not get a clear answer to. In previous years, they didn't even use a qualifying word saying it's like a nominal difference. They just said they get a scoring advantage. This year they added that word, which triggered me to ask, what does that mean? And I have not gotten an answer.
You'll pass that along when you do.
I can, yes.
Any other questions? All right, this is an action item, so we need to approve
The revised.
the revised 2024 Community Development Block Grant Regional Priorities. Second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Very good. And that will take us to the fiscal year 25 operating budget.
Okay, so in your packets, there was a FY25 operating budget. I also included a memo of any changes that happened between the draft that was presented last month and the final copy that you're looking at before you. I'll highlight a couple of those. Generally with programs that we receive funding for that are not automatically recurring grants, I will be pretty conservative in my projections on whether we'll receive that again. So for mobility management, I conservatively budgeted that as flat funding. We actually heard that in the draft 6-year improvement plan that's going to go before the Commonwealth Transportation Board, that they are recommending rather than getting 119,000, that we would be getting 215,000. So I amended our budget to account for that difference in funding. Also, there's some funding that we received for mobility management through the Community Foundation that we can roll into next year. So I went ahead and rolled that over. So those are the 2 changes in revenue. The changes in expenses. The first one is the expenses that would come along with that additional grant. Both are passed through to our contracted mobility management, which is JABA. And then as indicated in the April meeting, there's some changes to the salary and fringe. So for salary, I'll go into more detail later, but we have filled 2 of the 3 vacancies. So I was able to amend the budget with actuals versus projected amounts for those 2 positions. I also was able to put in what I decided to do for the 1 remaining vacancy is budget that at the max of the cap, just to make sure that we have enough funding in the budget should we find somebody at further along in their career that's going to be at the higher end. Another adjustment that I made was I did include tentative annual bonuses, which we have done in the past 2 or 3 years. Should there be favorable financial conditions at either calendar year end or fiscal year end, I went ahead and budgeted for those because I was still able to present a balanced budget. There was a decrease in fringe expense due to reported changes in both our long-term disability rate and our workman's comp rate. Those were confirmed, so that I was able to go and put those in as actuals. And then, as I discussed last month, the money that we receive annual allocation from DHCD still hasn't confirmed whether we're going to get the additional 25, so I did not amend that. What I did do, though, is I pulled out of the contingency line item directly budgeting for professional development. So you'll see when we go talk about some of the feedback that's been received by staff through the executive director's evaluation, that there's some real desire for more clear processes and how to access professional development funding. So I wanted to make sure to set some aside so that we didn't use that contingency on other programs and projects without being very intentional about developing the capacity of our own team to build. That doesn't mean we can't spend more than 20 if we decide to pull down some more contingency. I just wanted to make sure to protect at least 20 for professional development. So that's a change that's in there.
Questions? No questions? Then it is time to approve the fiscal year 25 operating budget.
So moved.
Second. All right, motion has been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All right, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Great. Budget.
Excellent, thanks.
That will take us to item 7, the executive director's report.
Okay, so the staffing update, which I already shared with you, is we have made 2 hires. I will, although she does not like this, give a very public kudos to Ruth for all of the work that she's done on the back end, screening candidates, making, setting up all of the interviews, making sure that we had a very well-documented, thorough process for bringing folks on board. We have been successful in hiring 2 different folks. One started this week. Her name is Sarah Simba. She'll come to a future meeting to be introduced to you. The second one does not begin until June, so I'll wait to introduce them till they're here. Both of them will be coming in as regional planner 2s, working in the transportation, MPO, rural transportation transit area. So very excited about that. So thank you. I know you don't like that, but thank you. The body update is in there as it normally is. Like I noted earlier, it's exciting to see those passings really start to climb. And then no additional updates. I left that just in case. That's all I have, unless you have questions on anything I didn't report on.
Questions? We don't. All right, we're ready to go into our closed session. And would you mind reading I state your name and move the rest of it?
I, Supervisor Mike Pruitt, move that the commission be convened to a closed session pursuant to the exemption found in section 2.2, Act 3711, Alpha 1 of the Code of Virginia to discuss matters of employee performance of the executive director.
Is there a second?
I will second.
And will you call the vote, please?
Supervisor Galloway,
Yes.
Supervisor Pruitt,
Yes.
Supervisor O'Brien. Supervisor O'Brien,
Is that a yes, Tony?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mr. Smith is absent. Supervisor Goolsby,
Yes.
Mr. Higgins,
Yes.
Supervisor Barlow,
Yes.
Supervisor Woodward,
Yes.
Supervisor Reed,
Yes.
Supervisor Rutherford,
Yes.
Commissioner Duranzio,
Yes.
Counselor Payne.
Yes.
Thank you, and we will stop recording. Changed.
I'd like to motion, I, Mike Pruitt, move that the commission exit closed session.
For a second,
Second.
and if you'll call the roll, please.
Supervisor Galloway,
Yes.
Supervisor Pruitt,
Yes.
Supervisor O'Brien.
Yes.
Oh. Mr. Smith is absent. Supervisor Goolsby,
Yes.
Mr. Higgins,
Yes.
Supervisor Barlow,
Yes.
Supervisor Woodward,
Yes.
Supervisor Reed,
Yes.
Supervisor Rutherford,
Yes.
Commissioner Duranzio,
Yes.
Counselor Payne.
Yes. Great, and a motion coming out of closed session?
I move that the commission certify that to the best of each member's knowledge, only business matters lawfully exempted from the open meeting requirements of Virginia from which an act acted in the motion authorizing closed session will occur discussed or considered in closed session.
Second. All right, you call it roll.
Supervisor Galloway,
Yes.
Supervisor Pruitt, Supervisor Goolsby,
Yes.
Mr. Higgins,
Yes.
Supervisor Barlow,
Yes.
Supervisor Woodward,
Yes.
Supervisor Reed,
Yes.
Supervisor Rutherford,
Yes.
Commissioner Duranzio,
Yes.
and Counselor Payne.
Yes. Very good. Thank you. And board, since that is, we have time permitting for roundtable, since we're just about a minute past 9. We will be moving past that item tonight. But you can see on the agenda what's coming to the next meeting, June 6th. And that's when we will elect the officer, the slate that's been brought forward today. And we'll do the follow-up, the evaluation items as well at that time. So if there is no objection, is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you, everyone. Having a good evening. You want these back? Yes, actually, you have all those emotions on.
I know.